Hello, everyone. This is Tim Strickland, Leadership Development Director at Feb Central, and this is the second video that we're putting together about navigating ministry in a time of social distancing. And the theme of this video is about giving and income, because as we speak to our churches and as we know you're all out there trying to get ready for this Sunday and just trying to figure what ministry is going to look like in days ahead, we realize that giving and income is a very significant topic because with our not having our regular Sunday gatherings and having much of our offerings often come in physically in the offering plate on a Sunday, we're figuring out how we're going to financially survive, move forward, what that's going to mean. And this video is intended to give you some ideas of how to manage that and how to just move forward in that financial area. Now, before I get into that, I want to review the 7 areas that we're going to be working on at Feb Central, and we've already shared the introductory video, and here's the 7 areas. Tech solutions for worship is one. We put up a great video yesterday of Kevin Perceau, pastor in Ottawa area, with Tom Haynes and our church planners, just talking about how to do tech. And it's about an hour-long video, but it gives all kinds of great information about how to do that. Kevin has done some great work in that area, and I encourage you to watch that. The second area is what we're doing today, giving and income, and I'll talk more about that in a moment. The third area is caring for the vulnerable. We have a lot of vulnerable people out there who are going to need our care in our churches and beyond. The next area is engaging in community, making sure we stay together in one another in our churches, and we are creative and wise in how we go about doing that. The next area is making the most of your time. Now, as a pastor, I think you're going to have no problem making the most of your time, but there's people in your churches, young people, people who have maybe been laid off or they're not able to go to work, who are going to need ideas to make the most of their time. And you can be praying, I think, is a big one, as well as doing some personal development. So we'll talk more about that later. Outreach is another area. How can we be reaching out in a time of social distancing? And we'll have information about that in videos to come. And also, just how, again, to use your time, just generally activities for people, maybe for children in the church. What activities can we be providing, doing, resources online, all that kind of thing. All right, those are the 7 areas. Let's talk today, though, about giving and income. And believe me, brothers, I understand this is a great challenge that we're facing. And I want to provide, to start off, 3 principles that I think are very important before we get into some of the more specifics and practical steps. The first principle is this, is that God is your provider. Jehovah Jireh, we used to sing growing up, that old song. Jehovah Jireh, my provider. And I know your pastors and church leaders, I know you know that God is your provider, but we need to be reminded, and we need to be reminding our people of that principle as well, especially when it comes to income. God is the source of our wealth ultimately, and we need to look to him as our provider. The second principle is that giving is primarily about discipleship. Jesus said, where your treasure is, there will your heart be also. I never felt bad as a pastor, or maybe there were times I did feel bad in the past, but I learned not to feel bad about talking about giving and money, because giving is a discipleship issue, because when people put their treasure in the right place in God's work, their heart tends to follow. And so when you're thinking about giving and how to keep the giving flowing, it's not just about money and survival, it's about far more than that. It's about discipleship of your people and keeping their hearts, they're just tracking in the right direction with the Lord, with the work that's going on at the church. The third principle that's just vital is that people tend to give to vision and not just to needs. I'll say that again, people give to vision and not to needs. People will give, occasionally when there's a big need, and so you can do that occasionally, but most of the time they want to give to something that they see is going somewhere and see the direction and the good things that are going to be happening. So in asking for giving from your people and communicating with them, your message, it must include a whole picture of what you're going to be doing to minister in days ahead. Remember, some people, they still think church is primarily about Sunday, and that with Sunday canceled in many churches, there's not so much to do and not much going on and not as much ministry may be going to happen. And that is not going to be true at all. We know that as pastors, but we've got to communicate that. And I encourage you to communicate with your people all that you're planning to do. And you might not have every detail, but you still need to communicate what you have. I've listed a whole bunch of areas that you can put in an email. You might write a physical letter to your church even. I know that's old school, but it's maybe a way that you could communicate with them, and even include a return envelope in that as well, with giving options for them through the envelope, or other options that you might have online. But here's some of the areas you got to let people know about. Let them know about your Sunday worship, what your plans are, how you're going online, or whatever it is you're doing. Caring for those in need, the vulnerable, letting people know how you're going to care for those who are in need and how they can get involved in those teams. You've got to communicate the opportunities for ministry that are out there right now. Even though we can't all go physically out, we can still do things. Midweek meetings. Maybe you have a midweek prayer meeting, or Bible studies, or life groups, or whatever it is you have. Communicate how that's going to be happening. Maybe it'll be in Google Hangouts or Zoom, or other video venues. Whatever it is you're planning, make sure that you communicate how that's going to be going forward as much as you can. Family ministries. What about the kids? All these people have kids at home, and maybe you're going to do some online programming for children. Maybe you're going to provide resources, for families and children. Right Now Media, perhaps, or other things that you find out there that you can share with families to keep them, focused on the Lord and being productive as they're out there at home. Online resources. Again, there's a whole host that you can post, but let people know you're going to be posting stuff. Put some stuff up already, and keep giving people opportunities to access those, and let them know you're going to be doing that. How you're going to be communicating with people, because communications is going to be vital in this time. Let them know how you're going to do that. Prayer requests. What if people need prayer? What if the church is asking for prayer? How can people get their prayer requests prayed for? And maybe you can have a whole team of people who are ready to pray for whatever the needs are out there. Another way to get people involved. And then your missionaries. Some people are going to be saying, what about our missionaries? They're facing this thing overseas, wherever they are, and they need support and prayer and finances, of course, too. Let the people know in your church how you're going to be handling that. And when you do that, then you have a platform where you can say, and in order to do all this, we need to be receiving ongoing giving, because we're not going to be stopping. As pastor, I'm going to be preparing messages, calling people, connecting in every way I can, going to be coordinating all these ministries of the church, and we need your support to be able to keep this going. And then you can give them all the ways to give, but then you're asking them to give not to a desperate need because the church is in trouble because people aren't giving the offering on Sunday. You're asking them to give to vision, to something that is moving forward, and in the way that the church is actually ministering to the people in the church and even beyond. And that's something that is worth getting on board with. Now, that's some of the messaging you need to get out. Now, let's talk a bit more about those communications. Email is still often one of your best routes. Not everyone's on it, but a lot of people are. Use your Facebook page if you have that. Use your website. Again, I mentioned a physical letter, which I mentioned that's old school, but you may want to write a physical letter to your people that tells them all the ways ministry will be happening, and then ask them to give towards that, and list the practical ways of giving, which we'll talk about in a couple minutes here. Make sure you have a plan for communicating that, and you may need to repeat that through all those channels, and don't just rely on one method of communication. Rely on multiple methods, whatever you have available. You might want to get your life group leaders involved in helping to communicate too, because they have direct connections with many of your people who you may not have all those connections, and they can help with that as well. Your elders, get them all involved. Be doing this as a team together, communicating. Now let's talk about some of the practical methods. How are you going to receive these offerings? And it's going to be through a mix of physical methods that are still available to us, and of course online methods. There's lots of opportunities there. Let's talk about physical methods first. People can mail in a check, a donation through the mail. And you can encourage them in that way. You may want to include return envelopes if you send out a physical letter. You might even want to put a stamp. You might want to give them several return envelopes in a letter, and at least put a stamp on one of them to get them started. Again, old school, but this might be the way we find that people can give. Another way, you might want to set up a secure mailbox at the church that is checked regularly and is secure and so on, that people can drop off a check or donation in that box. You might give them an email address to email and let the church know they're planning to come by, so they'll have comfort knowing you're going to get it and that it's secure. That might be a way to do it. I just talked to a pastor this morning, and they had, I guess, a senior. It might have been more than one in their church, and they have a fixed income, and they want to keep giving to the work of the church, but they're not getting out, and so they left the donation in the mailbox that they arranged with someone at the church. I think maybe the treasurer went over and picked that up. And so there are physical ways we can still transfer donations, and you might think of other ways. And again, on any of these videos, you think of other great ideas, let us know. We don't have all the ideas, but you're coming up with some good things. Let us know. Those are a few physical ways. Let's talk as well about electronic ways. Many of you already have some good electronic giving methods set up, but maybe you haven't, and now is the time. This is a priority. You can do it by some of the online giving platforms. Canada Helps is a popular one. Many churches are using that. Tithely is one. There's another one called PushPay. Check out some of our church websites that you know of that are using this, and you'll see what they're doing. You might even give them a call and ask some input on that. But I know Canada Helps seems to be an easy one to set up. There's a minor admin cost when people give to it, but it's well worth it to be receiving your offerings and continue with that. E-transfer is a big one as well. If you do online banking, it's easy to do e-transfers. And you'll want to get that set up to receive e-transfers from people and let them know how that can be done. Pastor Brent Dunbar in Montreal, Snowden Baptist, I had an email from him this morning, and they've set up this one-page document to help people do e-transfer, and we're going to be sharing that, just a general version of what they put together for their people, and we really appreciate that input from them. Also, we're going to be sharing, I mentioned about a letter earlier. I'm interrupting my flow here, but I'm going to be sharing a sample letter you could send out to your people. I mean, write your own letter, but you could use this as a template and pick and choose whatever you think is helpful in it, and we'll be sharing that as well. Anyways, back to electronic giving methods. There's also mobile apps, and I don't have a specific name of one right now, but there's churches that are using mobile apps, and if you're listening and you could post some of those names in the feedback, we would appreciate that on our Facebook page, or let us know so we can be sharing what you found to be effective. So those are some of the online methods that can be used. Hopefully you have a button on your church website, and if you don't, of course, you'll want to get that up and use these methods. Now, that's the main thing I wanted to share today. There'll be a written version of what I've been sharing right now that summarizes what I'm talking about. There's one last point, though. Make sure you say thank you to your people, whether it comes from you directly as the pastor or from the treasurer or from key leaders in your church. Make sure you are saying thank you really personally to people who are giving, because people are facing all kinds of financial challenges out there. And when they're giving to the church, there's going to be some sacrifice in that, even perhaps more than average these days. So be sure to thank people for their gifts. May the Lord bless you. May our provider provide for you. God bless you as you continue to do ministry. Please feel free to call me or contact me about this information. I'm happy to talk to you, coach you on this information, and help in any way that I can as you move forward, as you strategize how best to do this. Thank you.